I'm Joe Leeming. With me is James Randi, a professional magician who bills himself as the Amazing Randi. James, you've devoted much of your life to investigating other people's claims of having supernatural powers. In fact, you've offered to award $10,000 to anyone who can prove the existence of psychic phenomena. Why?
Well, I feel that as a magician who for the last 35 years has made a very handsome living entertaining people and bringing to them experiences, illusions, and whatnot that they might not normally see, I owe it to the public to start using some of that expertise to give them an alternate point of view on some widely held beliefs on everything from Van Daniken through ESP. My research over the past 20 years has indicated to me that the claims that are made for the paranormal need an awful lot more investigation than they're getting, and that a lot of the so-called scientific work that's been done is not scientific at all.
Do you deny the existence of psychic phenomena out of hand?
Of course, I can't do that because that wouldn't be a scientific attitude if I were to do that. I go into my investigation with the idea that I'm going to investigate these things and not debunk them. I'm not out to unfrock anybody. I'm not out to expose anybody or make fools of anybody. But I find that most of the people who try to claim that they have these things and try to convince me of it, 95% of them are genuine in their belief that they have the powers. They simply haven't ever subjected their powers or their claims to proper double-blind testing. 95% of them are therefore innocent of any guile, but about 5% perhaps are people who really know what they're doing and they're out-and-out fakes. The people like the Uri Gellers are performers. They're nightclub performers who came into the psychic field and decided to try to convince people they really do have the powers. But under genuine testing, they fail completely.
Is double-blind testing, as you called it, acceptable to everybody?
Well, it has to be, because I don't enter into any tests with these people unless they agree that the tests are fair, unless they agree that they will abide by the conclusions of the tests. Otherwise, I'm entering a race that I can only not win, you see, and I can't lose it, but we can just come to some sort of conclusion that really doesn't mean anything and doesn't have any value. That's not the kind of contest I'm going to enter. In fact, it's not really a contest. It's an examination of a claim, and these people should be, although in some cases they're not, should be quite amenable to properly designed protocol and testing procedures. If they're not, I strongly suspect that maybe they don't really have a case.
What about the entrance of the chance factor? I mean, it seems to me if someone claims to be able to use a divining rod, for instance, to douse for water or some other substance, and they, by chance, get it right 8 out of 10 times, does that prove that they don't have the powers?
Well, if they do it 8 out of 10 times when the chances are, say, 1 in 10, well, of course, they've statistically scored very high, depending on how many tests they do. If they only do 10 tests, then we have to start reconsidering our standards. Statistically speaking, sometimes the dowsers, of course, will beat the odds. Most of the time, they'll fall well below it. Occasionally, they'll fall right on the line. If you add all these together, you've got average results again. But I always ask them to make their claim in advance. I have to understand thoroughly exactly what their claim is. If they claim they can just barely beat the statistical odds, I'm not terribly interested, because that will, as you say, happen by accident occasionally. Most of the dowsers, however, if you're speaking specifically of that claim, that's finding water or treasure, oil, whatever, under the ground with a forked stick or a couple of pendula or some such thing. If those people are asked what their percentage is, in most cases, they say anywhere from 95 to 100%. Now, so they doom themselves right there, because the chances by chance of them getting 95 and 100% are extremely small. I'm not about to enter any contest or any testing condition like this unless everything's out front in the open. They understand what the testing procedure will be, what the statistical analysis, if any, will be, who the judges will be, and they must agree to abide by the conclusions.
After you have conducted a test and the volunteer has failed, do you find that they change their minds at all?
The true believer will never change his mind. People who have had a long-time conviction of whatever belief, well-founded or not, are very, very difficult to dissuade. You can present them with all kinds of evidence. It can be very, very good, very strong, very positive evidence that impartial viewers will agree with you, decide the matter one way or the other. And yet, if they really have enough at stake in the thing, if they really have enough going for them that depends upon their belief, there's no way you're going to convince them. What I hope to do, and I travel around this country and many other countries doing my lectures, and when I appear in front of these audiences, I just hope there are enough young people in the audience, particularly young people, who may have wondered about these things, who are reading the large amount of claptrap that's available, and perhaps they've uncritically accepted it because it's printed and read by so many people and said so very loudly. Because of that, I hope that I can get to these people at the point where they might be collapsing into belief and give them at least an alternate point of view. I don't require they accept my point of view, not by any means. Just accept the fact that there is an alternate, and I think more rational point of view.
Teach them to be skeptics, in other
Indeed.
words.
And there's nothing wrong with being a skeptic. A lot of people say, oh, you're one of those nasty skeptics. You doubt things. I doubt many things. I doubt the existence of Santa Claus. The Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny, for example, I can't say they don't exist, but I seriously doubt that they do.
Well, in your experience, do you find that scientists are attracted by claims of supernatural power more than other people?
Well, for various reasons, perhaps they are. They read the vast amount of literature that's available, a lot of it published by PhDs who really should know better, and there are a lot of incompetent and rather dense scientists around, unfortunately, but that doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. It doesn't mean that they're not perceptive. It means that they've committed themselves to a belief and they're determined to try to find data to fit the belief, which is not the scientific method. The scientific method is to find a theory which explains the data that you have assembled. And they go about it the other way, and if they go about it the other way, of course, they're going to find some sort of results. I think also that a lot of scientists have decided that there are Nobel Prizes just hanging in the air waiting to be plucked, and they think that they can reach up if they get onto some avant-garde sort of a thing that is attractive to the public and will get a lot of publicity, something on which they can write an impressive scientific paper and have it reviewed reasonably well, that perhaps a Nobel Prize is just waiting around the corner to fall into their laps. And they want to be in on something new like this.
Have you ever come across people who knowingly set out to deceive the public or part of the public through these methods?
About the 5% that I mentioned really know what they're doing, and they're usually performers. They're either people who have trained as magicians, as Uri Geller was trained, who have developed these techniques and have decided that people are pretty gullible. They can get away with almost anything. And what they discover early on is that scientists are among the easiest people in the world to fool. Now, there's a good reason for that. Scientists think logically. And if the magician, the performer, the psychic in this case, in quotes, wishes to fool a scientist, all he has to do is give him a plausible scenario that he can accept temporarily, and he is immediately bitten of the apple, and he goes to sleep like Sleeping Beauty and doesn't wake up until harsh reality catches up with him, as it has with many of them who have collapsed into a belief in parapsychology.
Well, it seems to me that people have always had a tendency to be superstitious. In your experience, are people more gullible nowadays about psychic phenomena than they have been in the past?
Well, if you mean in the past, another generation, I can't really judge from that except from reading the literature. We are now blessed and plagued by communication. We have media outlets, instantaneous television coverage from across the world, wide dissemination of ideas, whether they're sound ideas or not, and therefore people have an enormous amount of information coming in from all directions at all times. Because of this, perhaps the dissemination of this a rational approach to life and the philosophy of life is more easily obtained. I think that sensible people with a certain amount of choice in their lives, a brave choice that they sometimes have to make between the supernatural and reality, are able to sort these things out. But most people can't.
Have you ever thought of any more basic explanations of why we tend to believe in the existence of, say, a psychic world?
There's a need, a very strong need, and I think that it all goes back to the assumption, largely promoted by the media in the past and certainly at present, that life should be free of bumpiness. There should be no problems in life. Conflict should be a thing that is something we don't have to deal with. Things should be smooth, and our lives should be happy and rosy, free of disease and all kinds of problems, financial and otherwise. They're looking for a formula. They want 10 or 20 rules that they can follow. Thus the rise of religions, of course, and also the denial of death. I will not die, I'll appear to die, but really I'm immortal. Well, I can't accept those things because there's just no good evidence for them whatsoever. And I think it takes a certain amount of guts to face a world which really is real, something in which we are going to die, and that's all there is to it. That's not such a terrible thing. In fact, it's a marvelous facet of nature that we really must face up to. We see it happen every day. It's going to continue to happen, and it will happen to us. And there's nothing gruesome about that. We have a good run at it once. Let's make a very good run at it. Let's live a life that is productive and that perhaps leaves something behind. That's my immortality. The books I've written and the articles I've left behind, the lectures I've given, all are little seeds that I leave along. They sort of Johnny Appleseed of the psychic, perhaps, but you leave these little seeds along the way and hope that that leads to some sort of immortality, something that you won't see, but it's rather satisfying to know that it's there.
Why do you think you, as a professional magician, took up this task or challenge rather than a scientist, say?
Well, I think because of my particular expertise. I think that scientists who get to know me and realize that I can tie my shoes and calculate my income tax with a fair degree of accuracy. In other words, that I'm not just a person who pulls rabbits out of hats and does card tricks on stage for laughs and acts like the clown on stage. They begin to realize after a while that perhaps I do have something to say, and that something is a result of my peculiar expertise. Scientists, I wouldn't expect to have this expertise. They shouldn't know how tricks are done. When a scientist sits in my audience and sees me pull the rabbit out of the hat, he says, well, that's a trick. I don't understand it, how it's done, but it's a trick. But then some 12-year-old child appears before him or her and bends a spoon, and they say, no, that's not a trick. What is the difference? There is no difference, necessarily. And they shouldn't decide that there is a difference merely because one is branded as a trick and is done behind the footlights, and the other is done under fluorescent lights in a laboratory. So it's my peculiar expertise that enables me to at least present a different angle. I view it from a different perspective. It's a serious perspective, and it must be considered.
Well, you remind me that the secret of magic tricks is deception. And as a magician, you're better able to spot that than most of us.
There's the whole principle of magic, or one of the major principles of magic, is misdirection. And it's very easy to misdirect the logical mind. You see, children are hard to entertain, and they're hard to deceive as far as the magician is concerned, because they aren't sophisticated enough to make assumptions about life. But the scientist does make assumptions about his laboratory equipment. It doesn't deceive him. A crystal of copper sulfate in the bottom of a test tube, a particle in a cloud chamber, doesn't go out of its way to deceive. If it does something unusual, there's a good reason for that, and it behooves us to seek what the reason is.
Well, it seems to me that psychologists whose discipline deals with the organization of human behavior should be interested in studying psychic phenomena. Have you any idea why so few of them are willing to do this?
There's a good reason for it. I think it's an unfortunate reason. Most scientists won't fly in the face of colleagues. Have you ever heard of a man who was a member of the AMA, the American Medical Association, speaking against a doctor? Not under any circumstances. The man can be a butcher, and the American Medical Association won't come out against him. The academics will not clean house themselves. The psychologists merely say to me, I'm not interested. I don't investigate the tooth fairy or Santa Claus. These things don't interest me, nor does parapsychology. But it really is part of their responsibility, I think, to society, to make a statement, certainly when the subject comes close to them, to say, I think that that is claptrap, and I'll have nothing to do with it. That would be a very healthy thing, and most scientists can't speak up that way.
I've been talking about the existence or non-existence of psychic phenomena with James Randi, a magician known professionally as the Amazing Randi. Randi has devoted the last 10 years to investigating claims people have made that they possess psychic or even supernatural powers. He has also offered to give $10,000 to anyone who can prove such powers exist. Close to 600 people have applied for the award, but so far nobody has won it. Randi visited Cornell University to give a public lecture and demonstration and to hold seminars with faculty and students. This is Joe Leeming on the Cornell campus.